Good afternoon, everyone. We are right at 2:30, so we will go ahead and get started for today. Hopefully you all can hear me. My name is Brittany Boston, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And I get to play dual roles today as the facilitator and the presenter. So please bear with me when it comes to monitoring questions and the chat. I will do my best. And so before we jump into our content today, today's webinar, we'll be talking about strategies to support students with a parent or parents in the military. But before we jump into that, I do just want to remind everyone of a few housekeeping items. As a participant on the webinar today, you are in listen-only mode. And so please feel free to type in any questions or comments you may have in your questions or chat box, and the label will depend on whatever device it is that you joined us today with. And I will monitor those questions and get to those at the end of the presentation. This webinar is also being recorded and will be posted on our ICSPS website for you to access later or to share out with any colleagues that you feel may be interested in it. So with that, I will go ahead and jump into today's content. So as I said, my name is Brittany Boston. I am with ICSPS and I am the Associate Director for Equity and Outreach at the Center. So for those of you who may not be familiar with what ICSPS is or what we do, we are a professional development center that focuses on creating and supporting and delivering PD for career and technical education across Illinois. We provide technical assistance, we develop publications, we run webinars, all of the fun things that hopefully you guys have been seeing us do over the past few months and beyond. But our main focus is really on transition, recruitment, retention, and completion, and really looking at special populations learners. So those special populations under Perkins V. So a little overview of what we will be going over today. We're going to define what Perkins V refers to as military connected students or an individual who has a parent in the military. We'll look at what that definition actually is. We'll look at some of the challenges and barriers that these students can possibly face. We'll look at ways to inform and recruit. And you'll notice throughout the webinar that I will use this language interchangeably. So this webinar is meant to be beneficial to both the secondary and post-secondary system. However, we know when you're talking about junior high and high school students, we're not really recruiting students into those programs, right? They're there. We want to inform them about CTE programs, but we don't really recruit into junior high and high school. However, when we get into post-secondary and the community college, that is a little different. We are looking more at recruitment strategies there. And then we'll look at supports and services, not only for students, but also for families, especially when we're talking about military connected youth. Within the secondary system, it is just as beneficial to support their family as much as it is to support the student themselves. And then I really want to open it up for some discussion and for some questions. I actually have a couple of questions that I'll be asking later on throughout the webinar because I think it is the most beneficial to hear from the programs, hear from the institutions and what you guys are doing, where you're seeing maybe some gaps, some needed supports, and then we'll look at any questions or comments you guys may have, and I'll go through some additional resources that I feel could be useful when we're talking about special populations and working and supporting special population students as well. So that is our agenda for today. Let's go ahead and dive on in. And before we get too far in, I do want to mention The slides from today are in the handout section, so please feel free to download those. You'll see later on that there's quite a few links to the resources, to upcoming webinars, so please feel free to access those as well. So how does Perkins V define a military connected student? So when you look in Perkins V, they refer to students who have a parent or parents that is A, a member of the armed forces, and B, is on active duty. Now, if you look at this slide, you'll see that little in parentheses there. When we're looking at the term armed forces or active duty, we're looking at the definition that is found within the United States Code, specifically that section 101. So one of the caveats here is that when you look at the term armed forces, for whatever reason, it does not include the National Guard. And that active duty also does not include the National Guard. Now, I will say that, and this is more pertaining to postsecondary, because this is a conversation that I myself actually reached out to ICCB and asked, because it threw me for a loop a little bit. And so for post-secondary, when you're looking at special population students, they have to self-identify, right? So any student who, is in foster care, is experiencing homelessness, or has a parent who is an active member of the armed forces, they have to self-disclose that to you. Now, how you gather and collect that information and the specific questions that you ask regarding to that can be up to your institution. So when it comes to the term active duty armed forces and them leaving out sort of that National Guard piece, if that is not information that your institution necessarily needs for auditing purposes or anything along those lines, that is not specific information that ICCB is collecting. Now, I can't speak to the Illinois State Board of Education. I would highly advise, if you are with the secondary system, to reach out to them and see kind of what their understanding of it is. But at the end of the day, I think our main goal is to support our students and to provide them with the extra services and resources that they need to be successful. And if they have a parent in the military, then they have a parent in the military, right? So that is the definition per Perkins. I would highly encourage you to look with and have conversations within your institution to determine how specific you are going to be when you ask that information and collect that information from them. But that is the Perkins V definition. So let's look at some possible challenges that these students may face. So one of the challenges is the high mobility rate when it comes to being a military connected youth. And I do want to note here that for this particular special population, we may look at it and think, okay, when we're talking about high school, junior high, I can understand why that may be of a concern for a student and how they may need some additional supports and services. But when we get into college, when we get into the community college, the goal is to help our students to be more independent, right? To self-advocate for themselves and to really sort of take on that role of adult and sort of step out of their parents and their families and really take on those roles. However, when you look at the experiences that these students are encountering in high school and junior high, that impacts the way they build relationships when they move on to the post-secondary system. That impacts the way they look at academics and how they engage with their instructors. So keep that in mind when we're going over some of these challenges here. But the high mobility rate, this is, in my opinion, the overarching umbrella to all of the other concerns that are listed below. Because when you have a parent that is in the military, when they are on active duty, when they're being deployed, when you're having to relocate for their job, that plays a huge role. That impacts everything. That has a trickle down effect into your academic and social challenges, that if you're moving and going to frequent school changes and having to, say goodbye to friendships and build new friendships, and working in, trying to understand new teachers or instructors and how they operate and what their expectations are, it has a huge impact. And then also looking at being, separated from a parent or caregiver due to employment, and how you have a family member or a parent who is missing out on some possible major life, experiences for these students, birthdays, graduations, holidays, all of these experiences that are meant to be shared as a family. They may have someone in their life that is missing because of deployment. And then, the chance that the parent was injured or possibly died while they were deployed. Again, major emotional and psychological impact on these students. And when we're talking about, students with disabilities or students who have IEPs, the difficulties for either qualifying, receiving, or continuing those services. When you're transferring schools, when you're moving schools either every couple of years or once a month, or whatever the process may be for that particular student, there's a process that goes into that, right? We have to transfer files and student records, and that takes time. And then, re-engaging them into those services and IEP services, that takes time. And making sure that we're aware of, the issues that come along with that, and how that, yes, we have policies and procedures in place that have to be followed, but it does have an impact on, the student and where they are academically and how well they transition into a new school setting. So just keeping all of that in mind as well. And then understanding and interpreting new school regulations and policies. Like I just mentioned, every school, every district, every college has their own sort of policies and procedures put in place for reasons, but they're not, 100% the same across the board. And so this is not only for the student, but for the families as well, navigating that system and really understanding, what the requirements are, what the expectations are, what information is needed of them, and how best to get their child the education and services that they need. And then there's also an increased risk for depression and anxiety when it comes to military connected students due to, relocation, deployment of a parent, other things that I had mentioned of possibly a parent being injured while they're deployed, all of those things, building relationships, or, maybe there's a lack of being able to build relationships or having to say goodbye to friendships. And that can definitely have a psychological impact on these students. And then adjusting to curriculum and instructional methods. So again, when you're changing schools or, enrolling into college possibly for the first time, I think it's a learning curve for everyone, but getting used to a teacher or instructor's teaching style, being able to build those relationships, build those connections, communicate with the staff and the teachers and instructors as well. All of that is something that takes time and has to be built. And for some students that, are living the military life and are moving here and there, that can be difficult, and that can be something that is a struggle for them. So let's look at some ways that we can inform when we're talking about the secondary system, right? And recruit when it comes to post-secondary. So when we're looking at informing our students about the possibilities that are within CTE, we really want to look at strengthening partnerships and collaboration with either your local area high school or your community college, depending on whichever institution you personally are coming from. And we want to make sure that we're giving our students the earliest possible interaction with those CTE programs as we can. You know, I always say that you can't be interested in a career that you don't know exists, right? So when it comes to CTE, when it comes to the CTE programs, making sure that, you know, we're looking at those CTE exploration days that we can do with our local community colleges and our local high schools, and having the students interact with and see, you know, hands-on experiences of those programs. Or even now that we find ourselves in an all virtual world, maybe doing a virtual tour of you know, a CTE program on a community college, and having, you know, an interview with some of the instructors or people working in that field, but doing, you know, what we can to really inform our students early on of, you know, what a CTE program is. And then looking at academic and guidance counselors and making sure that, you know, they're abreast of the CTE programs and the benefits of having the students enroll, and informing all of our students about the different programs for CTE and gauging their interest, and, you know, career aptitude tests, taking those as a student, and really gauging, you know, your skills, your interests, and how you can take those and put them into a career, and, you know, get that life sustaining wage and really make it a career option for you. And then when you're looking at students who are interested in furthering their education and moving on to the post-secondary system, being able to inform them beforehand of the support services that are available to them when they enroll, so that they're aware that, you know, once they start a program, these resources, these services are out there, they're available to them. And then when we're looking at, you know, enrollment and admission into post-secondary, and even as we get down further into the secondary system, offering assistance with admission, offering assistance with registration, financial aid, this the process of, you know, admissions and enrolling into a college can be overwhelming, especially if they're a first generation student, or if, you know, they have a parent that is or has been deployed, and maybe, you know, they're a single parent and so they're have been raised by their grandparents, whatever their situation may be. If they don't have that support at home on how to navigate this process and navigate this system, it can be extremely overwhelming, to the point to where it just even deters them from the beginning to even enroll into the program. So really offering that assistance, maybe having that one point of contact for students, especially students that are connected to the military in some sort of way. You know, I know a lot of community colleges have, you know, a veteran affairs office. Wrapping that into that office as well. And so any sort of military connected student in any way, that's who they communicate with, right? So they know, you know, I'm talking to Sarah at, you know, this community college, and she's working with me to get enrolled and find out what my financial aid options are and all of that. And then when you're looking at the secondary system, really reviewing your enrollment policies. So if you have a student that comes in mid-year, what is the process for that? Is it a timely process? Is there, you know, I know a lot of times, especially when you're looking at students who are transferring from another state, there can be quite a bit of lag time between when the student has moved and when their records are transferred and everything that is needed, you know, immunization records, medical records, all of that, there can be quite a bit of lag time in between that. So do you have a policy in place as to how to handle that? And just making sure that we can be as flexible and adaptable as possible for those students who are enrolling mid-year. Okay, so let's go into some supports and services. So one of the big things that I think when it comes to special population students, or really when it comes to any students, um, hearing from their peers who are in similar situations, similar environments, similar family makeup, whatever the case may be, hearing from their peers and knowing that they're not the only ones and that there is someone else out there who's experiencing the same thing, going through the same thing, hitting those same speed bumps is extremely helpful. I mean, us as adults and professionals, it's helpful for us. So really looking at creating a support group for military connected students. And this is also a great way, you'll see it down here at the bottom, but this support group could be designed and led by actual students. And so this is a great way for those students to take the lead and to reach out to others and have that sense of community and connection with their school, their college, their peers when it comes to creating a support group. And then if you are in a school district or a community or a college where there really aren't a lot of military connected youth, you don't really have a large population of students who have a parent or parents in the military, that reaching out to administrators in those neighboring districts and sort of creating a support group that way, or creating a network that they can communicate with each other over email, they can start a club or whatever the case may be. Don't just simply look at your institution and think that it can only be people that go to your school or your college. Reach out into the community and find some neighboring local programs that have students with military parents and engage with them that way as well. And then, as I had previously alluded to and mentioned, really encouraging students to get involved, whether it's through extracurriculars, whether it's through programs within the community, whether it's through clubs or other programs that are offered through your institution. Getting them involved really helps build a sense of belonging, a sense of community. It helps them to build those relationships and those attachments and feel as though this is their home. This is where they belong. This is where they want to stay. And so really encouraging them to become involved and active. So some more supports and services when it comes to, academic advisors and financial aid advisors, making sure that we are staying up to date and informed on the benefits and supports that are available to military connected students. And I know, I know that these can tend to change. These can tend to be added on. There can be more supports that come out. There can be supports based on who's in office and all of that fun stuff. But just making sure that we're staying up to date on what's available to them, and really looking at, again, like I had mentioned, the Office for Veteran Services. If that's an office that you have within your community college, you can absolutely have that office work with these students as well, because they know this information already, right? And so being able to communicate what supports are available for our military connected students is a huge help for them, because they may not be aware of them, or a lot of times they may already be aware of them but not to the point to where they know who they need to contact to get that process started. And then also looking at, you know, as educational institutions, there's only so much you guys can do, right? There's only so many supports that we can put into place for these students. So connecting with community organizations or programs that can provide these students with additional supports and services. So as I had mentioned, you know, depression and anxiety can be something that military connected students are at an increased risk for. So looking at the mental health services within your community and building that partnership and communication with them. Childcare facilities, you know, and this again for all students, you may have a student who they themselves have a child and needs that additional support there. Community action agencies, they, depending on your area, whether you have a community action agency or not, they have a handful of different services, you know, for individuals based on income. They have their early Head Start and Head Start programs. They have programs that assist with heating bills. They have food service programs, quite a few different options there. Government benefit offices, housing departments, just any of the organizations that you feel that could provide that additional support where your institution may not be able to. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, you know, that depression and anxiety, making sure that we are really documenting any changes in behavior or activity level for our students and paying attention to any of those patterns that may be developing. And again, just letting them know that we're there to listen, we're there to support. And if they have any concerns, if they don't feel comfortable talking to a family member or, you know, a guardian or whoever is their adult in their life, letting them know that there is someone that they can come to talk to. Encouraging staff to maintain consistency, predictability, and structure in the school environment. Now, I know that currently that is almost next to impossible, unfortunately. We are living in a time that is extremely unpredictable and we think we have it figured out, and then, you know, a week later things change and we're under new guidance and we're given different information. But even now, when we find ourselves in this virtual environment, there are so many different avenues and platforms and things that we can utilize to stay in communication with our students, to you know, let them know that you know, you guys are still out there, you're still doing the work, you're still there to support them, you're still there to educate them, and just trying to keep it as consistent as we possibly can, because, you know, these super strategies were actually created pre-pandemic. And so a lot of the information that you will see is really pertaining to, you know, face-to-face and in person. And unfortunately, that is not the life that we are all living at the moment. And so figuring out how to take a very unideal situation and still keep it as consistent and structured for our students as we possibly can. And then looking at, you know, providing professional development for staff to kind of raise awareness and understanding of some of the unique challenges that might be faced by military connected students. So again, I had talked about, you know, that high mobility rate and how that really can impact how these students and these individuals build relationships, how it can impact, you know, their academic performance, how it can impact their involvement with school and with their instructors and teachers, and just really trying to do our best to educate ourselves on that as well. And this is a special population that is newer with the rollout of Perkins 5. And so I can only imagine that over the next year or so, there will be more and more research and evidence-based practices coming out regarding military connected students and how we can best support them and help them be successful through their academic journey. And so then when we're talking about families, when we're talking about parents, some ways that we can help support them is, when we're thinking about how we communicate with our students' parents, really asking the parent what their preferred form of communication is. If they prefer an email, if they prefer, a Zoom call, if they prefer a face-to-face in person when that time comes, because that time will come. We will be able to all be face-to-face again if they prefer that way, if they prefer text messaging, really what their preferred choice is. And then allowing for flexibility with parent meetings or even student meetings. I think if in 2020 has taught us anything, it has taught us to be flexible. And so, even when the time comes that we go back to somewhat of a new normal, still utilizing Zoom, still utilizing those virtual platforms to, hold those parent-teacher conferences or to hold, advising meetings with students, may be some of the best options we have to fit within our students' and parents' schedules. And so not while we are all hoping and wanting to be back in person and back to face, there are tools that have been beneficial and have helped our students and parents become more engaged when we're looking at, those virtual options for communicating and meeting with them. So now I want to hear from you guys. This is the group participation time. Just because we aren't face-to-face and in person doesn't mean I still can't force you guys to participate and engage with me here. So I want to know how your institution, whether you are with the secondary system or the post-secondary system, how are you guys currently supporting your military connected students? Or if this is not something that you guys are currently doing, what are you hoping to do in the future? And then are you seeing any gaps in services? Are there any areas that for whatever reason your institution is not able to meet that need and you need to reach out within your community? So please feel free, if you have a working microphone, you can absolutely raise your hand and I can unmute you. Or if you want to type it into the questions or chat feature, I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what you're doing, what you want to be doing, what you hope to be doing. And I have no problem with uncomfortable silence. So we can sit here for a little bit until we get some comments coming in. So we did have a comment about primary service, so primarily referrals to service providers. Yes, absolutely. Like I had mentioned before, really building those partnerships and connections with the different entities within your community that can help provide those additional supports and services, and being able to refer them out. And again, paying attention to, and having those conversations with our students, with our parents, and knowing, kind of being able to read between the lines, right? And knowing what may be of benefit to them. Our students may not be as eager to admit where they need that additional support. And so being able to really pick up on their clues and their language and what they're communicating with you for that additional support as well. So anyone else having anything that they're currently doing to support their students or hoping to do, anything that you're doing now that we've gone virtual? Yeah, so someone has says that, however, military families are not generally considered a special population by our staff. Yes, so I will say with the rollout of Perkins 5, there have been new additions to our special populations family. And this is one of those special populations that is new to Perkins 5. It was not in Perkins 4 and it was not previously a special population. And so that may take some informing, that may take some educating about what and who special populations students are currently. And so looking at those students that do have a parent or parents in the military is absolutely a special population. Yes, thank you for that. All right, so I have a few other things to share with you guys today, but I do want to open it up for any questions or comments that you might have. And while those are hopefully coming in through the chat, I'm going to go ahead and skip to our next slide here. So as I had mentioned, this is part of a special population webinar series that ICSPS is doing. This is actually the second webinar that we've done. We did one last week and we'll continue through, I think we have them all scheduled out through March, but each webinar will focus on a specific special population. So for December, we are looking at foster care involved students. So the foster care involved students is either a student who is currently in foster care or a student who has aged out of the foster care system. And then later in November, we will look at economically disadvantaged students. And so like I said, we have them scheduled out through March, but I figure we'll wait until after winter break. We'll focus on December now, and then we will wait until after winter break for the rest of those dates. But absolutely keep an eye out for those. Like I said, the PowerPoint is in the handout, so feel free to download that and you can actually utilize those links to register for the ones in December. So then some additional resources here that I think could be helpful and are pertinent when we're talking about special populations is obviously those special populations super strategies. The webinars that you will see throughout throughout this series, my apologies, is based on those super strategies. And so there is additional information in those super strategies, so I definitely encourage you to look at those, check those out. They are divided between secondary and post-secondary because some of the supports and services differ a bit when we're talking about the different entities. So check those out. If you have any questions or comments regarding those, you can always reach out to me. And then we also did ICSPS in conjunction with SIPDC just wrapped up, I think today was actually the last webinar, wrapped up a series on recruitment, engagement, and retention. And it was designed for adult education programs, but I still highly encourage you guys to check out those webinars because it had some wonderful information and it came from the programs themselves. And as I had mentioned earlier, actually hearing from other programs, I feel like is so much more beneficial to you guys, right? Because you guys are the ones out there doing the work, supporting these students, engaging with these students. And so in that series, they talk about utilizing social media, so Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all of the other things that I'm probably too old to know exist right now, but using those platforms to really recruit our students, to engage our students, how to use learning communities in this virtual environment to keep our students engaged and to feel connected with us. So check that out because I think it's an absolutely great resource. And then we also a few months back did a series for universal design for learning. That is also on our website, so please feel free to check those out as well. The concept of universal design for learning is it looks at how, not every individual learns and in information the same way. So how can we as educators design our classroom, design our curriculum in a way that really supports all of our learners? So again, please feel free to check that out. And as always, I always encourage people to explore and jump around our website because we do have quite a bit of professional development and resources on varying topics, but really with that overarching lens of equity and access and transition. So check all of those out. And if you have any questions regarding the super strategies, any questions about today's webinar or any of the upcoming webinars for this special population series, please feel free to email me. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm not seeing any more questions or comments coming through. So unless there are any questions, I will let you guys get back to your day. I hope this was helpful, and be sure to join me again in December for 2 additional webinars as we continue the Special Populations series. Thank you so much.